Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here, and today an unstoppable onslaught of gnomes has breached the gates and they pour into our mountain kingdom. You are one of the heroes rising up to lead and inspire the troll defenders as we fight for our survival. Now, you must rally support from the clans, drive back the gnome invaders, and defend the sacred Great Halls as the situation gets even worse. Fall of the Mountain King is a standalone prequel to Hall of the Mountain King, and it's set in the catastrophic war that drove the trolls from their mountainous kingdom generations ago. Now this is for 1 to 5 players. It takes 30 minutes per player to play, is for ages 14 and up, and published by Burnt Islands Games. Now, it's on Kickstarter right now, so I'm going to show you how the game works, and I'll see you on the other side. This is a Kickstarter preview, so all the art and components you see here are prototype. These are not final, so you're going to want to check the Kickstarter link in the description of this video to see all the final art and components. The board's double-sided. I have this set up for a 4-player game. Now you'll notice by looking at the board, there's different spots of different colors. These are different domains. They're different types. I have different icons of different colors, and each of these are different caverns within a specific domain. Now over the course of the game, it is played over 3 waves, and each of those waves go through 4 phases. Now each player is going to have a couple of layers where they'll start with some trolls, and they're going to be moving out and going into different caverns throughout the game, and they're trying to essentially control different caverns within different domains and within the same domains, because at the end of the first 2 waves, the main way to score points is to be controlling different caverns and different domains. We'll go over the scoring later, but area control is a big part of this game. And for a longer term goal, you can see there's a certain amount of random points set up, and if you control the most caverns in those domains, at the end of the game, you'll get a certain amount of points too. So there's points you'll be getting at the different waves. At the end of the last wave, scoring's a little different. So there's some short, mid, and long-term planning that you'll be doing. Each player has their own player board. This will help track supplies, which are essentially tracking your actions throughout the game. And everyone has an Ancestry Tile here, and you're going to be building this sort of in a spatial way to build up your actions available, and the way that you select actions is very interesting. So the first part of each of the waves is to build your ancestry. Now players are given 4 Ancestry cards. Now from this, they're going to be drafting. You're going to select one, you're going to place it down, and then you're going to pass the rest to your neighbor to the left, and you'll keep doing this until you've placed 3 cards, and the last card gets discarded. In the second round, you pass to the right. So it's going to be card drafting to pick out which sort of ancestry cards you want to build your action selection sort of plateau, if you will. Now when placing these, you must cover at least one of the quadrants that are there, and you can't rotate it. It has to always be sort of the right orientation there. So for example, I might go something like this. I'm covering this with the same thing. So you're trying to figure out what actions am I going to cover, which ones am I going to kind of give myself. By the way, this can never be bigger than a 6x6 grid. So maybe by the time I'm done, it looks something like this. Now notice I have a barrel here, and this is supplies. So you start this on a specific spot, depending on which wave you're in or round. And for each one of these, you're going to go to the right here. You're going to give yourself a supply. Then you're going to look at how many empty spots you have, and you're going to get one of these desperation tokens for every one to the right of here. This is going to allow you to take some additional power to some actions. Then we're going to go to the next phase of the wave, which is the battle. Now, in turn order, let's say with the first and going clockwise, the first thing you'll do is you'll spend a supply. So you'll go down just like this. Then you're either going to take 2 weak actions or 1 strong action. So let's say I wanted to take a weak action. I would place this cube on an action spot that doesn't have a number, because those ones are used for the strong actions. You cannot place it on the supplies, because that's just used for this. And you can't place it here. These are elders. These essentially will give you a certain amount of points at the end of the game, depending on how many you have. And you can never cover over these when you're putting your tiles out and things like that. So let's just say I go here. And this is going to, and a weak action is always a power of 1, because it's just 1 cube. So we can do a weak action, and these are the advance actions. Now when you advance, you can take a troll from anywhere and move it to any single spot. And you can do it as many times as you have power. In this case, a weak action is just 1, so we're moving 1 troll. And we can move it to anywhere that we can sort of reach. For example, I have a bunch here in this layer, and I could pick this, and I could move it all the way through here, because I have someone here presence here in order to go through it. I could just put it here. I could not say go here, because I don't have any sort of presence in any of the things to connect it. You're sort of connecting in networks here. So I could go like this, for example, and that would be my 1 weak action of advancing. Now let's say for my next weak action, I go here, that is bolstering. Now when you bolster, you could take a troll from your supply and place it into any cavern that you dominate, which is basically you're the only, person there. In this case here, or always your layers as well. So I could bolster and maybe put one right here. Yeah, let's do that. Let's put it right in this layer. I'll show you why in just a moment here. We'll put them standing up. Now these are meeples in this prototype, but check the Kickstarter link in the description of this video to see all the cool ways that these trolls really look in the final product. And then it will be the next player's turn clockwise. But let's say it comes back to me. Spend another supply. I can do 2 weak or 1 strong. Now strong action, you could take some of these ones that have the 2. So let's say I just go like this. There's going to be a single strong action and it's a power of 2. So I can essentially advance 2 of them. Now let's say we take these 2 and we go here. Now here we have our trolls are in with these gnomes. Now this is sort of a randomized setup as to where they're at and things like that. But because I've brought trolls in where the gnome is, we then flip over all the tokens that are there, in this case just 1, and if we have at least equal or more to this, we get to remove this and we'll get this much honor, which essentially is points. Now you'll be tracking honor at the edge of the board. Now you'll see this icon, this is the clan that we are in for this domain. And this is the domain there, so we would get 1 influence that regardless of how many, the defense of the gnomes, we essentially just move up 1. Now this is important because whoever's furthest on here is going to get a certain amount of points at the end of the game. Now this is randomized as the points. At the end of the game, I'll get 8 points if I'm the furthest along this track, 4 for second place, 2 points for third place. But it also gives you some abilities to vote on certain things in different areas that we'll cover later. So it's sort of gaining influence up there. And when we remove that token, we put it next to the gnome wheel. This is going to make them a little more angry. We'll show you what this does later. You'd also move this equal to the damage you did there, which is 2. Now there's 2 tripwires here that do different things. We'll talk about these later. This essentially would cause a mid-wave invasion of the gnomes, but we're going to go invasions over them at the end of the wave. So this would normally trigger now, but we'll go over this later. Now, if that gnome token was a number higher than this, we'd move our trolls repelled back to any of our layers, and we'd add they'd entrench. We'd add another gnome token, unless there were already 2 there. Now, we did a strong action, so it'd be the next player's turn, but when it comes back, we go down in supplies, and let's say we want to take another strong action, because there's an interesting concept here I want to show you, is that you can sort of link together things. Like this can go through here, because there's a cube, and over to here in an adjacent way, and you can sort of draw like a box around it. I could just draw a box around this if you would, and put 2 cubes here and take a strong action of 1, 2. So 2 advance. So you can do it that way. But if there's cubes from before, you can sort of like say that's a box that I can go around. So I literally could take a strong action and go here and here, and that's going to give me a power of 3. 2 because this one said 2, and 1 for here for influence. Now, there's a certain amount of champions that I've placed out here depending on the amount of players, and I can get influence on those if I'd like. So let's say I go here, I had 3 power into that action of influence, so I'd go 3, but if you're the first one to put influence there, you get to go an additional 1. You're going to be seeing who has the most influence here, because at the end of the round, you're going to be able to recruit one of these champions if you have the most influence on there. And these champions are going to do all sorts of cool things that I'll show you. They all have different abilities. You'll actually get to attach, some of them to pawns. For example, some of these have different, tokens here, and these normally would slide right onto your champion meeple that you place out, and this kind of gives you an idea of what that ability does. So it would have been the next player's turn, but when it comes back to me, let's say I go down, and let's say I do 2 weak actions of advance, just like that. Then it comes back to my turn. Let's say I do a strong one. Now in this case, let's say I put together all of these bolsters. This one, and then it goes through these cubes. A wild. This is a wild that can be used for anything, and this. So I could literally get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 power of bolster. Now the last action I'll show you is the gnome action. This one was a strong action for power of 2. Now this allows you to move this up to that power of 2 in this case, clockwise. So I could go here or I could go here. I could go less than. Now it goes over this tripwire. When I do so, I move my influence marker up here like this. And what this does is you'll get honor, which is points, depending on where you are on this boost track. So where your marker is, you'd get that number in honor. And this is in addition to how many spaces you just moved the pawn on the gnome wheel as well. And the other ones are pretty much the same. Bolstering, influencing. This is allowing you to move trolls. Now there's one other thing about that gnome action is at the end of the round, which I'm going to go over pretty soon, is there's going to be some invasions of gnomes. And these are randomly placed here. They're going to be telling us which domain and how many of the different gnomes are going to be coming out. And when you go to the gnome wheel, the first thing you actually get to do is you get to look at one of these cards so you have an idea of how many are coming and where they're coming from. And this might be important when taking these actions, especially if you're planning on bolstering near a certain area. Now once all players have run out of supplies, that wave's over, and then we're going to go to the end of the wave. So first we're going to do Entrenchment. Anywhere that has some gnomes there, you'll put another one unless there's already 2 there. Then we're going to look at these different gate cards. It shows you where they're going to come from. And first we look and we see this. And in the first wave, 2 would come out. If it was a second wave, 3. If it was the third wave, sort of like the end of the third round, there'd be 4. And this shows you where they're coming from. So the first one's going to come out now. The swarm is here. It's going to come through this gate or this gate. So it will come into here or here. And it's always going to go in the path of like the least resistance. So it's going to come here first. So this one will come here. Now what will happen is this destroys this troll and the gnome gets removed as well. But there's a little bit of a consolation here. Because the first fallen in wave 1 always gets 3 honor. So that yellow player that just lost their yellow troll gets 3 honor right now. If it was the second wave, they would have gotten 4. If it's the third wave, they would have gotten 5. Any other trolls after it on this specific invasion would get 2. So you get a little more for being first fallen, but you do get some honor if your trolls are removed. And then the second one would come in, and now that this is open, it would just go path of least resistance. It would sort of sit there. Now another invasion would happen. And so we would flip this over and we do the same thing, but now from here. So you do this, there's a certain amount of these that happen depending on the amount of players. Then we would essentially award the champions. We'd look at each one of them. We'd look who has most influence. In this case, it's tied. Blue is on the bottom and yellow. Blue got there first, so blue would actually win this. They would actually get 2 influence on the board for this. So going up like this, and again, now, when I showed you that example about the gnomes, if there was a tie, the gnome could go to 1 or 2 different caverns. It would go to whoever has the most influence here. They would be the one to vote. So having influence not only is trying to get you end game points, that's one of the times, one way that you can vote if you have the most influence there. Now the other ones get a consolation. They can either choose to get 1 vote in this clan, or they could take honor equal to the amount of these yellow thick lines I went through. This one went through 2 of them, so you get 2 honor or 1 vote in this clan. This player could get 1 honor or 1 vote in this clan. Now, the layers are considered adjacent to each other. Now, you do this for every other champion. If a champion doesn't have any influence from anyone, then it simply gets removed because all new ones are coming out next wave. So once you've finished all that, you go to the scoring the wave. Now, waves 1 and 2 score identically, and wave 3 is different. Now, each player is going to score sort of simultaneously. Now, you're going to look at each domain and just go kind of sort of clockwise, but let's look at this one. You'll score 6 points for the first cavern in the domain that you control. So in this case, right here, blue has 6 points because it controls this. Yellow gets 6 points because it controls that. Now, if you were tied like this, nobody controls that one. And anyone that scored at least 1 cavern in a domain loses 1 point for each overrun cavern like this one. So both yellow and blue would lose 1 point. So let's say it looked like this. Now, any cavern you have control in, other than the first one, is only worth 2 points. So this one was worth 6 for the blue player. This one is worth 2, so they would have gotten 8 points here, where the yellow player would have just have gotten 6. And essentially do that for every domain on the board. Now at the end of the first and second waves, you'll end up resetting up the different rounds. So you'll be, resetting up the gate cards and the champions and things like that. But at the end of the third wave, things scored differently. Let's pretend this is what it looked like at the end of the third wave. Now it might be a little bit more busier than this in real life, but let's take this example. You're gonna look at each of these great hall numbers that were randomly placed at the beginning of the game. You're gonna look at each adjacent cavern. This one has 3 of them, for example, and you'll see who controls the majority of the caverns. They're going to get this. In this case, blue controls this one, blue controls this one, and they're tied here. So blue would win because it's 2 to essentially nothing, so they'd get all 12. However, the gnomes can score against you and even take all the points if they have the majority. But in this case, blue controls this one, no one controls this one, and the gnomes control this one. So it's 1 to 1. So these would be split between the blue player, which gets 6 honor, and the gnomes, they don't actually get points, but they essentially stop you from getting more other players, for example. And then you would just go through and do that for every one of the great halls on the board. And then you get a certain amount of points based upon the amount of elder signs that look like this that are in your ancestry, because remember, you can't cover over them. And depending on how many you get a certain amount of honor. Like if you get all the way to 9, you'd get 30 honor for that, but that's really hard to get. Then you look at this board, you go top to bottom, you look at each clan and see who has the most votes, first, second, third place, and you get a certain amount of honor for those, and whoever has the most honor at this point, at the end of the game, is the winner. Well, there you have Fall of the Mountain King, and as I showed in the overview, you're trying to gain the most honor controlling caverns using an innovative action selection mechanism. Now, if you'd like to see all the final art and components and all the different pledge levels available, you can click the link below me in the description of this video, and it will take you directly to the Kickstarter project page, and I'm sure that Burnt Island Games would love your support.